a new shocking report involving Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman Erik Karlsson. He played so well at the Four Nations faceoff that everybody's talking about him. And recent buzz has linked Karlsson to a new team, an actual trade partner for Erik Karlsson, and a situation that might actually work for both parties. Erik Karlsson has expressed his interest in playing for a Stanley Cup caliber team, a team that can compete for a prize he has yet to achieve in his NHL career. Karlsson is already almost a sure thing to be a Hall of Famer, but the one thing lacking on his mantle is a Stanley Cup. So Erik Karlsson will do whatever it takes to get that Stanley Cup, and if the Penguins have his best interest in mind, trading him to this new mystery team could be the answer. We're going to dive into that later in the video, but we have plenty to talk about regarding EK65. It has been a heck of a Four Nations face-off for EK, to the point where his name has been in the news more than it has been in a very long time. So we have to break it down. But first, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, Penguins Digest. 20% of you are subscribed that are watching these videos. Over 80% of you have not yet subscribed, and I have no idea what you're waiting for. Join this club, Penguins Digest. We are just a giant group of crazy Penguins fans that love to talk about our team. Feel free to explode my comment section with whatever you want to talk about, and let's have a conversation. You guys hit that sub button, and I'll keep you up to date on the latest Pittsburgh Penguins news, rumors, analysis, and anything pertaining to your favorite team. Obviously, we have so much to talk about with this team right now leading up to the trade deadline, but the most important thing right now is Erik Karlsson, and it's relevant because of the Four Nations faceoff. He played in it, he played well, and now everybody's talking about him. A player we never thought we'd be able to move on from, but now it is a realistic possibility after the performance that he put on display in that Four Nations faceoff. So let's jump right into it. Yes, we are talking about Erik Karlsson again. I know I just made a video about this 2 videos ago. You guys know I keep track of this stuff. But Erik Karlsson continues to be in the news, and if the stove's hot, I'm going to keep touching it until my hand burns off of my body, because Erik Karlsson being traded would be a blockbuster move that would shake up our entire roster, and I'm all about it. I'm all about blockbuster moves, especially if it makes our team better, and this trade would probably make our team better. Now, I was just arguing the other day, and you guys are wondering, why are you flipping on us? Why are you one day telling us why we should keep Erik Karlsson, and another day telling us why we should get rid of Erik Karlsson? Well, I'm still not all in favor of getting rid of Erik Karlsson. I'll admit that to you guys, but if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it's what's best for our player, what's best for EK, then it's what's best for me, because I have the player's interest in mind as well as the team's interest. So if EK wants to go, let him go. Right here, Four Nations faceoff has improved the value of him in this trade market, because right now the trade market is a little bit weak. I'll tell you guys, I've looked at the trade block and it just keeps getting a little bit more dilated as time goes on. Big names are going to be traded. JT Miller already on the move, and there's going to be more big names to come. Erik Karlsson, arguably the biggest name on the trade front right now, I would argue, because the Canucks situation with Pettersson and everybody else has sorted itself out. So I would say Erik Karlsson, probably the biggest name on the block right now, and we're going to dive into what Josh Yeo had to say from The Athletic, a Penguins beat reporter and a Penguins writer that has a ton of great content, by the way, guys. He said a lot of good stuff about Erik Karlsson, answered some fans' questions, so I want to dive into what he said in just a moment. He believes that trading Karlsson, Sweden's best player possibly, during the Four Nations faceoff, especially in the game against Canada, that could really implement a new strategy for Kyle Dubas to move on from Erik Karlsson. It opens the door and frees up what Kyle Dubas is able to do with this roster. The only problem with Erik Karlsson is his cap hit. That is literally the only problem. The reason why you guys are so upset, and why I'm upset, everybody is upset about Erik Karlsson, is because this dude's paid a lot of money to be pretty mediocre. And this season he has been a lot better, and I've defended him on countless occasions. But it's still a ridiculous cap hit for a player that is not performing at a Norris Trophy level, which is what he is paid to do. So, looking at the cap situation for the Pittsburgh Penguins, this is specifically the defense, Erik Karlsson, getting rid of him would be insane, because that would free up even more money for the Penguins to make more moves. Now, will Kyle Dubas make the right moves if given that kind of freedom? We don't know that. But at least let Kyle Dubas roll the dice. And he's the one that brought Karlsson in the first place. So if he could get assets in return for Karlsson and kind of retool on the fly like he is obviously trying to do for this team, that would be an ideal scenario. He's continuing to try to flip players whenever it is deemed fit, especially these pending UFAs. And that's what Josh Yeo is going to dive into here in this segment. Josh Yeo's update on the Penguins trade deadline plans. And that is exactly what I want to talk about, guys, because obviously the Penguins are trying their best to get this situation figured out, to sort it all out, to build for the future. All of the financial freedom that they're going to have in the coming years is going to give them a lot of flexibility to bring in any players that they would be interested in. Literally anybody. Mitch Marner, Sam Bennett, Mason McTavish, the list goes on. There are so many players that the Penguins could target and completely 180 this roster in a heartbeat. But Kyle Dubas has to be willing to undo some of the things that he's done. That's the biggest issue. Is Kyle Dubas ready to move on from some of these big players? He's already expressed interest in trading Erik Karlsson. That's no surprise. But if you actually dive into what the Penguins' strategy is, Karlsson is still not on the trade block per se because they think it's a better idea to wait till summer to trade him. The only reason that's changing now is because of his performance in the Four Nations faceoff. He played so well in this tournament that other GMs are getting a completely different version of Erik Karlsson, and they're seeing the tape of what he was able to do for Team Sweden. He was arguably their best player in the entire tournament. I mean, that is not an understatement at all. And if you look at this right here, would this possibly make GMs look a little bit closer for him at the deadline/summer? And what Josh Yeo said is, why, yes, I think it is. And it was an outstanding game for him against Canada, maybe Sweden's best player. And I agree with that. Karlsson playing well in the series only helps Kyle Dubas. And Yeo even went on to say, I assure you, to this fan. And I will assure you as well. This is nothing but good. We want to see the best version of Erik Karlsson because you're not going to buy a product from the store if it's not as advertised. When the Penguins traded for Erik Karlsson, they did not get what was advertised. But now you're seeing the potential. You're seeing his ceiling is still just as high as when the Penguins got him in the first place. Who else is gone at the deadline? This is more about the overall plan, not just Karlsson, but who could be traded this deadline or this summer. And this is what Joshua said. Certainly Matt Grzelcyk, which we've done videos about, seems like a fine candidate to go. Beauvillier, which we've also done videos about, seems like a candidate to go. Rakell, who we've done videos about, maybe. But it would be crazy if he was traded. Bunting, Achari, Nedeljkovic, we've kind of talked about all these guys. Lots of possibilities for Dubas. What will Dubas actually do? I'm not sure. But when they announced the fire sale, we all got excited. Not excited in a good way, but excited in the sense that, oh my gosh, this team's going to look a lot different very quickly. And that's not been the case because Dubas has since nixed that and said, no, we're not having a fire sale. We are trying to compete right now. We're 6 points out of a playoff spot. Why would we rebuild? Why would we go into a full rebuild when we have one of the greatest players in NHL history as our captain, Sidney Crosby? There will be an injustice to Sidney Crosby. So obviously Dubas isn't done. A lot of moves still to come. But the most important note is that Erik Karlsson is not one of the players that Josh Yeo listed in that report. Karlsson wants his Stanley Cup. That is a fact. He's said that. He's been outspoken about the fact that he wants to compete for a Stanley Cup on a contending team. There are teams out there that need a defenseman desperately that Erik Karlsson could be the answer for. So Karlsson turns 35 in May. He's still very much a decent NHL player. He hasn't met his production level expected of him when he's traded for by Pittsburgh. We know that, but he's still a good player. Okay, nobody's going to sit here and tell you that Erik Karlsson is not still a very competent defenseman. He might be spotty defensively sometimes, but as far as playmaking ability, offensive defensemen come, being able to generate something from nothing, Erik Karlsson's as good as they are. Still in this game, I believe that in my heart, that Erik Karlsson is just as good as anybody else in this league. He can be. Has he been for Pittsburgh? No, but he can be. And we're seeing that with Sweden. That's why everything has changed with Erik Karlsson. They were set. Dubas was set on not trading him until the summer. That has changed. This Four Nations faceoff did so much for Kyle Dubas, for Erik Karlsson, for the Penguins. Nobody understands how big this is. Like, nobody was considering trading Erik Karlsson during this deadline because they knew that they could maximize his return during the summer. It'd be easier to make the finances work on a deal. With the salary cap increasing, that even helps that more. But right now could be the time. You have to strike while the iron is hot. You have to take advantage of peak value for Erik Karlsson. He has not had value like this since he has been a Penguin. His value has gone like this since he's been a Penguin. Plummeting. Now it's going back up. Slowly, but surely it's going back up. If he continues to play well once we get back to the NHL season on Saturday, I fully expect him to be traded. Fully. Because Kyle Dubas is not going to miss that opportunity. This is a window that has been created by the Four Nations faceoff, and he can't miss his window. He cannot miss his window. So the last thing that it says there is this tournament play for Erik Karlsson has drawn sharp contrast to his time in Pittsburgh. He's been a completely different player. And that is a reminder to people that he can still be very good. And that is very good for Kyle Dubas and the Penguins. That is the point I'm trying to get across. Now we get into the rumor that you guys have been waiting the entire video to hear about, because that's what I hinted at the beginning of the video. What team is linked to Erik Karlsson? Well, I'll tell you. Erik Karlsson wants a cup. Well, Kyle Cushman from The Score proposed a solution to that problem. Give a Stanley Cup winning team that's trying to go back-to-back. Now you're seeing where I'm going with this. The Florida Panthers have been linked to Erik Karlsson. Erik Karlsson on the Florida Panthers would be absolutely nuts. And this is real. This is a rumor, but it's real. It might be a little bit outlandish, but it's real. If anybody wants to talk about this kind of stuff, I'm all ears. I'm here and now because I love the idea of trading him to the Panthers. If Erik Karlsson can get what he wants, which is a Stanley Cup, and the Florida Panthers can get what they want, which is a capable defenseman, that is a win-win trade for both teams. The Panthers have a ton of young players, a ton of prospects that they could ship to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Erik Karlsson. And they have plenty of money working around to make a deal work as well. If the Panthers think Erik Karlsson makes them a Stanley Cup contender, again, which they already are, but if they think he puts him over the top, they're going to make this trade. Absolutely will at least try, at least inquire about this trade. And he suggested this because there has been reports about Dubas preferring to move Erik Karlsson, but also there has been growing speculation that he would be moved before the deadline. Again, all of this happening because of the Four Nations face-off. So then we dive into the actual quote from Cushman. This is that the Four Nations face-off was the first time we saw Karlsson in a playoff environment since 2019. It would be a shame if we didn't get to see him in the postseason at least once more. The Panthers need an impact player on the back end. Kulikov, don't even get me started about former Penguin Dmitry Kulikov. And then Karlsson, he would bump Kulikov back down and replace Aaron Ekblad on the top power play unit. That sounds like a dream come true for the Florida Panthers. Florida would have to get some help to make the salary work because Karlsson's under contract for 2 seasons, and after this year at a $10 million cap hit. The Penguins are currently retaining 2 players, but both contracts expire at the end of the season. So Pittsburgh could retain some of Karlsson's price if it was worth it, if the Panthers are willing to pay up. So Karlsson to the Panthers might be a long shot, but it's a fun trade to imagine. It is so fun to imagine that because I'm a big fan of the Panthers. I'm a big fan of what they got going on down there in Florida. Down here in Florida, I should say. Because Florida Panthers hockey is different. That team, when they get to the playoffs, Matthew Tkachuk, Sasha Barkov, Ekblad elevated his game. They got the goaltending. Sergei Bobrovsky, Evan Rodriguez, as clutch as they come. Love that dude in Pittsburgh. Their roster is so deep. The Finns that they have on that roster, holy moly. Luosterainen, they got Lundell. You're talking their defensemen. Their roster is absolutely ridiculous. And Erik Karlsson makes them so much better because they lost Brandon Montour. And that's what this next part says about Karlsson, because Brandon Montour was a huge loss for them. Gustav Forsling is probably their best defenseman at this point, but when they lost Brandon Montour to the Kraken in free agency, that was probably the biggest loss that they suffered from their Stanley Cup winning team. So bringing in another top 4 defenseman like Erik Karlsson, yes, he's a completely different defenseman than Brandon Montour, but that would be pretty sick on the Panthers. Having Erik Karlsson on a power play unit with Barkov and Tkachuk and Reinhart and Bennett, that is disgusting. That is disgusting. So, guys, I'm putting it out there because it was news. I didn't make this up. This is The Score reporting this. One of their reporters making this projected trade, this possible outcome for Erik Karlsson, the Penguins, and the Panthers. It's a win-win. If they can find a way to make this trade work salary-wise and actually meet the Penguins' asking price and Kyle Dubas' asking price with the prospects and the draft picks that are required to pry a player like Erik Karlsson away. The only reason his value is a little bit lower is because of his salary cap. But he just did a heck of a lot in that tournament for his trade value, ladies and gentlemen, because you have to understand, the trade value is going to depend, for playoff teams, What can you do for me in big games? It's not what can you do for me now. It's what can you do for me later in the playoffs. Erik Karlsson has always been a clutch player in his career, a player that can elevate his game in big moments. He put it on display again at the Four Nations faceoff. Okay, so you guys have to understand that Erik Karlsson is a big game player. He has that reputation. He just reminded everybody of that. So his value is going up. And teams like the Panthers that think one more piece can guarantee them at least a Stanley Cup final appearance, and then anything can happen. I like it. I like it a lot. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Penguins Digest. We did some rumors. We did some free agency type updates, some trade deadline type updates, a lot of different possibilities for the Pittsburgh Penguins moving forward with the salary cap that I will continue to mention because it is very relevant now that it is raising. Every team has increased flexibility, but I told you in a previous video, I think the Penguins are in a better spot than maybe any other team in the entire National Hockey League. Kyle Dubas, keep playing chess, not checkers. Four Nations face-off final between the USA and Canada tomorrow, and then we'll be right back to Penguins content for the Penguins-Capitals game on Saturday. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and we'll see you next time on Penguins Digest.